Today I'm switching things up a bit. Instead of covering a full year like I did with 1994 and 1995, I'm starting a new chapter, one that focuses on the artists themselves. And the first artist I want to talk about in this new format is Mase. I'm starting with him for a reason. His story opened up my eyes to the reality that the industry doesn't always work in the artist's favor. That sometimes what looks like success on the other side can be damaging underneath. And yeah, I may be a little biased because I'm from Harlem too, but can you blame me? He wasn't just a rapper to me. Mase was the first artist who made me question what was really happening behind the music. By 1996, hip-hop was no longer something I was hearing around me. It was something I was paying close attention to. I didn't fully understand the music industry then, but I understood what it meant for someone to walk away from everything people usually run toward. The fame, the money, the attention. And yeah, that stood out to me. And that's why I'm starting here with Mase, 1996, the beginning of a bigger conversation. I know there's a lot going on with Diddy right now, and while that's not what this video is about, I'm not going to ignore it either. And while I have a lot to say, I'm gonna save that for another video. But I will point this out. Mase didn't just recently get his publications back out of the kindness of anyone's heart. That happened right before the Cassie stuff hit, and it's clearly a PR move on Diddy's part. But before we go any deeper, here's a little bit about Mase, for anyone who may not know the full scope of his career. Real name Mason Betha. He was born in Jacksonville, Florida, but raised in Harlem, New York at the age of 5. He came up in the early 90s alongside a crew of Harlem heavyweights like Cameron and Big L as part of a group called Children of the Corn, which really stood for Children of the Corner. By the time he was in his late teens, Mase was already developing a buzz locally. Not just for his smooth voice, but for the way he moved between gritty street lyrics and polished charisma. That duality is what made him stand out. It's also what got him signed to Bad Boy Records after a freestyle in Atlanta caught Puff Daddy's attention. I can't even say Puff Daddy. In 1996, he hit the scene officially, first showing up in 112's Only You remix with Biggie, and from there, he was everywhere. Guest verses on hits like Can't Nobody Hold Me Down.
There's no guy slicker than this young fly nigga. Nickel 9 liquor, floss you die quicker. Did Fed time, out of town pie flipper. Turn Chris Dallas to a crooked eye sipper.
Been Around the World.
That trick what Mase who? That ain't what Mase do. Got a lot of girls that'll love to replace you. Tell it to your face, boo, not behind your back. People talk, never mind.
And More Money, More Problems made him a household name before he even dropped his debut album. And when Harlem World came out in 1997, that album was massive. It went quadruple platinum and had the kind of mainstream appeal that very few rappers had at the time. Songs like Feel So Good.
And I chill the way you met me. With a jet ski, a tattoo, a Etsy. Smoke my Nestle. No mad rap, ass cat, where my check be. Problem with y'all, I said direct.
It was the way he moved through it all. The energy, the confidence, and eventually the choice to walk away. So while I love the singles and still know every word to What You Want, I was just as pulled by songs like 24 Hours to Live, where you could hear that darker undercurrent underneath the surface. That track in particular showed another side of him, a reminder that he wasn't just a polished product, but that he had something real to say. You just had to listen past the packaging.
I turn out all the hoes that's heterosexual. Smack and see the niggas right off the pedestal. I even look for my dad that I never knew. To show him how I look in my Beretta too. I do good shit like take kids from the ghetto. Show them what they can have if they never settle. Take every white kid from high class level. Show them what Christmas like growing up in the ghetto. Teach niggas how to spend, stash the rest. Give blunts to the niggas under massive stress. Give every bum on the street cash to invest and hope Harlem World blow up. Be my last request.
Before the platinum albums, before the shiny suits, and before Bad Boy turned him into a household name, Mase was Murder Mase from Harlem. Now, I was too young to witness that part firsthand, but anyone I grew up around who was older, people my siblings knew, people from the neighborhood who was just close to him, they all spoke about Mase the same way. He had it before the industry came calling. That's not something I made up. It's what I heard consistently from people who were there. And if you listen to Cameron and anyone else who came up with him, you'll hear it too. Mase wasn't just discovered and repackaged. That circle of Harlem talent he was a part of wasn't a secret in the streets. He had real presence and a way of standing out even next to some of the most respected lyricists of the era. He wasn't one-dimensional, and he didn't just get lucky. So when people reduce him to Puff's sidekick, they're not just simplifying, they're skipping over an entire layer of who he was and how he got there. He had a lane, and Harlem built that. The industry just figured out how to monetize it, and that's the part that gets lost when the story gets told through surface-level timelines. Once Mase signed with Bad Boy, the shift was immediate. Murder Mase became just Mase. The sound was lighter, the visuals got flashier. Suddenly, he was in suits, floating through music videos next to Puff like he was already a pop star. To the world, it looked effortless. But if you were paying attention, really paying attention, you could feel something underneath. Mase wasn't just blowing up, he was being positioned. Not just for his success, but for marketability. This wasn't the same energy I heard about from his Children of the Corn days. It was gritty, unfiltered, local. This was polished and tailored to fit the luxury brand Bad Boy was pushing at the time. And it worked. He skyrocketed. But even as he rose, something felt off. They were pushing the image harder than the person. It wasn't about what Mase had to say, it was about how presentable he could be, how well he could play his part next to Puff. And that's when I first started to understand the difference between being an artist and being used as one. Because Mase could rap, and he had Harlem in him. There was depth there. But you could barely see that side unless you knew what to look for, or unless you remember what came before. The industry didn't want that part of him. They wanted what was easier to control. I'll be honest, at first I didn't know everything Mase was dealing with, and to most people watching from the outside, he looked like he had it all. It looked like he won, but then I read his book. I was 12 when I picked up Revelations, and that was the first time I heard an artist talk about the cost of that lifestyle. Not just in money, but in peace, in health, in freedom. That book shifted something for me. It helped me understand that the same industry that celebrates you when the lights are on will drain you dry when no one's watching. And Mase saw that very early. And that really stood out to me, especially as a kid from Harlem, where that kind of success was the dream. But he stepped away while people were still clapping for him. And that's not easy. And that's also not weakness. That's clarity. People love to say Mase was confused or that he was a hypocrite and he couldn't decide if he wanted to preach or rap, or that he left because he got scared. But when you really listen to what he's been saying all these years, it's consistent. He knew exactly what he was walking away from. What's wild is that he was saying this decades ago, long before it was normal to speak out, before artists was using their platforms to call out labels or advocate for their rights. And now all this information is finally coming to light, especially with everything surrounding Diddy. Mase's words hit differently. He wasn't bitter, he wasn't trying to take anyone down. He was just trying to protect his soul, and I don't blame him for that. When you look at what happened to Biggie, Craig Mack, Shine, Black Rob, and the Lox, when you really take it in, it's clear. This industry hasn't been designed to protect the artists. It's been built to profit off of them, to drain them, and then move on. And Mase saw that early on. He saw what was happening and said, I'm not doing this. And while people laughed, criticized, and questioned him, he waited. And now, it's like the truth caught up to what he was already trying to say. And that's what I respect. Not because it's trendy now, not because he got it all right, but because he trusted himself enough to leave before the damage became permanent. He didn't just save himself. He gave the rest of us an example of what it means to listen to your spirit, even when the world is telling you to stay in the spotlight. So if Mase ever came across this video, I just want to say this. Thank you. Thank you for showing us that it's okay to walk away from something that doesn't align with who you are anymore. Thank you for being honest before honesty was a brand, before speaking up meant clicks and interviews and hashtags. You did it when it cost you something. That kind of clarity takes courage. And a lot of people needed to hear that. I needed to hear it, especially when I was younger trying to make sense of why this thing we love so much could be so destructive. So seriously, thank you for choosing peace over pressure. It might have taken some time, but it's finally caught up. The truth always does. And this is why I chose to start with Mase. Not just because of the music, though the music still hits. And not just because of the nostalgia, though I'll always have love for that era. But because his story was the first time I understood how layered this industry really is. How someone could be at the top and still feel like they need to leave. And how doing that before everything crashes can actually be a form of survival. Mase represented a turning point, not just in hip hop, but the way I listened to it. After him, I paid closer attention and what it all meant beyond the charts. And I know I'm not the only one. So I want to hear from you too. When did you first hear Mase? What song hit you the hardest? And now, years later, do you see his exit differently? Let's talk about this in the comments, because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a conversation.